Ciao, I'm Mario, the Swiss car guy on YouTube, and it's that special time of the year again. Total cost of ownership time. Yes, because over 5 years after I sold the car, I finally managed to gather all the receipts and the data on the expenses for my 1991 Mercedes-Benz 500 SL. So I can finally tally up all the costs and calculate the total cost of ownership of the car, like I did with my other cars. If you haven't seen those videos, there is a card somewhere on screen, and I will also put a link to the playlist in the description. I owned the 500 SL from January 2012 to April of 2016, about 4 years and 2 months. And yes, it was a 500 SL and not an SL 500. You see, it wasn't until 1993 that Mercedes-Benz changed the nomenclature of all their cars to letters before numbers. Therefore, until 1992, the model was called a 500 SL, and starting in 1993, it became the SL 500. By the way, I will interject this tally with anecdotes, facts about the car, and poor attempts at comedy. If all you care about is the final numbers, please go to the time code
27 minutes and 0 seconds.
My car being a 1991 means that it was one of the very first iterations of the R129 generation SL that came out in 1989. So a car with the electronically controlled mechanical Bosch KE Jetronic injection. Starting in 1992, the SL was offered with a more modern digital LH Jetronic, which did away with the mechanical fuel distributor. However, those cars also had biodegradable wiring harnesses. While environmentally friendlier once the car needs to be recycled, those biodegradable wiring harnesses have the nasty habit of biodegrading way before the car has reached the end of its life. Meaning that at some point, at least the entire wiring harness in the engine bay needs to be replaced, as the heat from the engine greatly accelerates the decomposition of the wiring's insulation, leading to short circuits, electrical gremlins, or even fire. Mercedes only fixed this on the models from 1998 onwards. And since those cars were too expensive back when I was shopping for an SL, I opted for a 91 or earlier car. That's one reason why I specifically looked for an earlier car. The other reason is the fact that the 32-valve double overhead cam M119 V8 engine in the 500 SL with the KE Jetronic had 326 horsepower, while the later LH Jetronic and Motoronic equipped engines only produced 320 horsepower. That's almost 2% difference. And don't get me started on the single overhead camshaft M113 V8 engine that was offered starting from 1999 with its pathetic 306 horsepower. But if power is so important to me, why did I not get a 600 SL with its 394 horsepower V12? For one, they were more expensive to buy in acceptable condition. I also already owned a 12-cylinder car at the time, and I wanted something a bit cheaper to run as a second car. The V12 also seemed a bit pointless to me, since it's only 0.1 second quicker in the sprint from 0 to 100 km per hour. And since the 600 didn't come out until 1992, all the models up to 1998 would suffer from the wiring harness problem. Most 600s would also be very well equipped examples, meaning that those cars would most likely have ADS, the adaptive damping suspension. I specifically looked for a car without ADS. This is basically a variation of Citroen's hydropneumatic suspension. It continually monitors and adjusts the suspension and provides the ability to change the car's ride from soft to firm at the push of the button. Of course, it also features the other perks of hydropneumatic suspension, such as adjustable height and self-leveling. While it's an amazing system, it is also a fairly complicated one, certainly compared to regular coilovers. And even Mercedes dealerships, especially nowadays, don't have a lot of expertise on this system when it goes wrong. Ironically, if you have a car with ADS problems, your best bet is to go to Citroen specialists, as they are very familiar with the hydropneumatic suspension Citroen used until about 2017. Also, most Citroen enthusiasts seem to like ADS. So, with that out of the way, I bought my 500 SL on the 31st of January 2012 with 139,275 kilometers for 9,000 Swiss francs. For your reference, 1 Swiss franc is about $1.10. It was about 80 euro cents back then, it's now at 96 cents. It was 70 pence sterling, which has now gone up to 80 cents. Being the savvy buyer that I am, I bought the convertible in the depth of winter, knowing I would be able to get a better deal. Being the not so savvy car buyer that I am as well, meant that I had to drive the car home in winter. A rear-wheel drive car with badly worn old summer tires that pulled strongly to the right and had trouble driving in a straight line during a snowstorm. What is normally a 40-minute drive turned into a 3-hour journey. On the one hand, I couldn't really drive faster than 60 kilometers per hour because the car would start to skid, which was very unfortunate given I was on the motorway. And due to the heavy snow, only one lane was really drivable. Luckily, my brother-in-law was escorting me in his VW Touran, and he caught all the friendly greetings from all the drivers I was holding up. Sorry. We also encountered a car crash, which caused a traffic jam. By the time it was my turn to drive past the crash site, the policemen were urging me to drive faster, which I couldn't really do without risking spinning the car out. Luckily, they did not stop me, as it being Switzerland, I'm fairly confident they could have fined me. Eventually we made it home, and the car was very filthy from all the winter weather and the road salt. But that did not bother me too much, as R129s are fairly rust-resistant cars in general, and mine was not exactly a mint example, as evidenced by the fact that it wouldn't drive in a straight line. What can I say? I buy bottom of the market, alright? But even if my cars need some care, I always try to make sure they are fundamentally solid. The car then spent the rest of the winter in the garage. In the meantime, I bought a hardtop holder on eBay for 114 francs. Since R129s only have very basic, non-insulated soft tops with a plastic rear screen, all the cars were equipped as standard with an additional fiberglass hardtop that even has a heated glass rear screen. So if you want to be able to drive with the top down, you need to take the hardtop off first. And at that point, you have to store it somewhere. And the hardtop holder is great since it stores the hardtop vertically, occupying only very little floor space in the garage, and with its casters you can easily move it around. It also came with a very snug cover for the hardtop. I took the hardtop off in March of 2012 and I didn't put it back on until I sold the car 4 years later. Since the car was still on its original 21 years old soft top, I decided to give it a little refresh by cleaning it and then impregnating it with Renovo products. The products cost me 78 francs. The car would have needed a new soft top, as it was a bit ropey and the plastic rear screens were starting to crack. But the top was not leaking badly, and I did not want to spend thousands on a new top. In March it was time to get the SL ready for the open top season. I started by buying new tires, Hankook Ventus Prime 2, that were 857 francs fitted. At 139,435 kilometers, I also had a very large service performed, which included brake pads all around, track rod ends in the front, and a flush of all liquids. And I mean all liquids. In fact, I went to pick up the car from the service 3 times. The first time, the mechanic told me they had changed the automatic transmission fluid. When I asked whether they had drained the torque converter, he replied that there is no practical way of doing that. I then pointed out that I was pretty sure the torque converter in that car had a drain plug somewhere. He told me to come back the next day. And the reason I was so adamant about a complete transmission flush was the fact that the transmission was shifting very poorly, harshly and late. It wasn't slipping though, so I was confident a transmission flush would solve the issue, and it did. The next day the mechanic was a bit humbled when he told me that there was indeed a drain plug and that they were able to drain all the old fluid. He got a bit puzzled when I asked him whether they had replaced the engine coolant as well. When he told me that that was not a common fluid to replace, I reminded him that I wanted all fluids replaced. So I was invited to come back the next day. On the third day the car was finally done. It shifted properly and drove straight. I could finally start enjoying it. That service cost me 2,795 francs. It included 9 hours of labor. So with new tires I had spent 3,652 francs to get the car in good working order. You might argue that I should have bought a better car in the first place, but I personally prefer to buy the cheaper car and have the work performed the way I want it done, rather than just trust the seller's word that it has been done properly. When I started driving the car with the top open, I realized that the sun visors in that car were in the way. When they were up, they would block my view of the sky as they extended beyond the frame of the windshield, and they blocked the narrow space between the windscreen frame and, the top of my view. And in the down position, the sun visors would block my view out of the windscreen as they basically stop vertically right in front of my eyes. So I decided to remove them entirely. I put them in a bag and later gave them to the new owner along with the car. When taking out the sun visors, I replaced the plastic cap around the mounting hole on the driver's side as it was busted. That little piece of color-coded plastic cost me a surprisingly healthy 52 francs. Speaking of internal cosmetics, the panels in the door cards that house the seat controls were loose in my car. On the driver's side it was even held in place with a bit of wire, since the little tabs holding it on had broken off. Those panels are held onto the door card by a combination of plastic tabs and metal springs. And the best thing, Mercedes sells replacement plates with new tabs. So you just unscrew the old plate with the broken off tabs and screw the new one in place. Easy. I replaced the plate on both sides as well as all the accompanying springs. The 2 plates cost me 10 francs and the 4 springs were 14 francs. So 24 francs in total to fix the seat adjustment panels. I wonder why bodging around with some wire when new OEM parts are so cheap. Around the same time, I also wanted to be able to open the soft top while in movement. Stock, the R129, only allows you to operate the top while the car is stationary. However, I find it very convenient to be able to do it at low speed, like in stop-and-go traffic or at traffic lights. Otherwise, you have to stay stationary until the top is fully opened or fully closed, which is particularly bad at traffic lights that have turned green. Legend has it that Mercedes-Benz planned to offer that functionality on the R129 and even tested operating the top at wind speeds of up to 100 km per hour. But the TÜV, the German inspection authority, had concerns about the safety for cyclists apparently, and therefore the functionality was scrapped. On early R129s there is an easy way to enable the functionality by just cutting the wire that communicates the vehicle speed to the soft top control unit. However, that also means that the top can now be operated at any speed. For me it was a good compromise, as even I am not dumb enough to operate the mechanism at high speeds. This mod just required the use of a wire cutter and a few cents worth of insulating tape. Too little to even list it here as I am rounding to entire francs. After putting a couple of thousand kilometers on the car, I noticed that in some instances, when I used the indicator, the instrument cluster would just fritz out briefly and all the warning lights would turn on and the dials would go to 0. It basically looked like when you first turn the ignition on a car and everything in the instrument cluster turns on until you start the car. By reading forums, I found out that it was most likely a bad capacitor inside the instrument cluster. So, as a winter project, I uninstalled the instrument cluster from the car, carefully opened it up, and I replaced the offending capacitor. A 6-pack of quality Nippon Chemicon 105 degrees rated 16 volt 470 microfarad capacitors cost me 8 francs on eBay. I still have 5 left, but I'm not going to break the price down to the individual one I bought, because then I'd have to start breaking down shipping fees as well, and let's be honest, whether it's 8 francs or 1 franc and 33 cents, it's still a very cheap repair. Another winter project was my power antenna. It would fully retract, most of the time, but it would never fully extend. The electric motor was fine, just the antenna mast itself needed to be cleaned properly. For that purpose I bought some antenna cleaning wipes by Hirschmann, the antenna's original manufacturer, on eBay. A 12-pack of those wipes cost me 9 francs. I took the mast out of the car and first soaked it with some WD-40 to get all the sections to move again. Then I used 2 antenna wipes to clean off the antenna and leave a fine layer of lubrication behind. After I reinstalled the mast into the car, the antenna worked perfectly. Winter project number 3 were the armrests in the door cards. On the R129 they are hinged and serve as the cover for the compartment in the door card. So you swing them up to access the compartment underneath. That hinge, however, is made of plastic and will break over time. The result is that the armrests will get loose and start detaching from the door cards. So I took off the door cards and got the armrests out. Not only was the hinge cracked on the driver's side, but the plastic tubes on the back of it were mostly broken off. Those tubes stick through the door card and basically act as spacers that allow the armrest to be screwed in from the back of the door card. I epoxied the crack in the hinge and replaced the broken off tubes with similar length threaded sleeves and used the corresponding M6 bolts from both sides to hold the sleeves onto the armrest and then the armrest onto the door card. The sleeves, bolts and washers cost me 23 francs from the local hardware store. And I still have leftovers, 8 years later. This was a great cost-effective repair and an early example of me correcting a major car manufacturer's bad engineering. I also spent 6 francs on a bag of clips for the door card. In the summer, I noticed that the car's ventilation would always heat at full capacity. I figured the monovalve, which regulates the flow of hot water to the heater, was stuck open. So I bought a good used monovalve on eBay for 44 francs and replaced it myself. That fixed the problem. After a while, I was randomly getting the problem with the car that it would start misfiring and going into limp mode while ASR and ABS would stop working. I read online that it might be caused by the voltage surge protection relay. Since it was the easiest option to try, I bought a new one on eBay for 28 francs. That, however, did not solve the problem. Investigating a bit further, I came across this wondrous contraption that I had never had in any of my previous cars. The ignition distributor. I took the caps off and found the distributor on the driver's side had humidity inside of it and the contacts were corroded. The one on the passenger side was fine, but I bought 2 new Bosch distributor caps and rotors from an online part seller for 78 francs per side and a new O-ring from Mercedes-Benz for 5 francs. I ended up only replacing the cap and the rotor on the driver's side and kept the other ones as spares. As I never used them, I do not include their cost into the tally. I still have them and I might sell them or use them on a future car. The new rotor and cap solved the misfire problem, but the ABS light would still come on randomly, like once a week or so. But since the car would soon have to go to its periodic state inspection, I couldn't risk the light coming on during the inspection or it would have been an immediate fail. So I needed to fix the problem, which ultimately led me to the brake light switch. On the R129, that switch not only tells the brake lights to turn on when you push the brake pedal, it also sends a signal to the ABS control unit. My brake lights were working fine, but I reckoned that the switch's secondary function might be bad. So I bought a new brake light switch from an online parts seller for 23 francs and replaced it myself. This solved the problem. Before the inspection, I had also the steering gearbox resealed as it had started to leak quite substantially. While in there, the pulley and the tensioner for the ancillary belt was replaced as well. This whole job cost me 1,315 francs, of which 5 hours were labor. In the spring of 2014, the car had its second and last service under my ownership. That was just a regular service with a mandatory emissions check and it cost me 720 francs. The last service item I had done on the car was a refill of the AC system, about a year later, since it wasn't cooling properly anymore. That cost me 100 francs. So there you have it. I spent 6,317 francs on maintenance and repairs in the 4 years and 2 months that I owned the car. That's 1,506 francs per year. Or with only 14,379 kilometers driven in that period, it's 44 cents per kilometer. But what car guy spends money just on keeping the car going? Of course, I had to upgrade the car in ways that were meaningful to me, but you might find completely unnecessary. This is why I list these upgrades separately from the repairs and maintenance. When I bought the car, it had white indicators in the front, which is incorrect for this year of SL. I find the car looks so much better with the amber indicators, so I bought a very cheap set of used ones on eBay for 52 francs. They were so cheap because one of them had a small corner broken off. This didn't bother me at first, since I just wanted to see what they looked like on the car. They looked great, but on the car the chipped off corner looked bad. So I bought another intact indicator on eBay for just 24 francs. That one, however, would sit a little bit loose and needed a small spacer next to the clip for it to sit nice and snug. A 5-cent coin fit just perfectly, so that spacer cost me 5 cents, which in this tally gets rounded down to 0 francs. I actually still have the old white indicators in case anyone's interested. I think I even have the amber indicator with the chipped off corner. When I bought the car, it had a non-original wood shifter. It wasn't terrible, but it was not the same wood as the rest of the center console, which always annoyed me. Since original shifters on the early R129s are quite ugly and very expensive, I bought another aftermarket one, but this time in the correct dark walnut burl and installed it myself. I still have the old shifter somewhere. In the fall of 2012, I came across a great deal for a set of the original AMG Styling 2 18-inch wheels for the car at 550 francs delivered. The wheels were in great condition, just the center caps were worn, so I ordered a set of new center caps on eBay for 12 francs. I still have the old ones. The wheels also needed new tires, so I bought a set of Hankook Ventus S1 Evo 2. Since the wheels were staggered, I had to order 2 different sizes. The tires cost me 934 francs fitted. With the new wheels, the car again was not driving straight, so I had another steering geometry done for 184 francs. With AMG wheels from that period being non-OEM, I had to get a permit in order to use those wheels legally on my car. I got that from Mercedes-Benz Switzerland, who were the distributor for AMG wheels in Switzerland back in the day. It cost me 50 francs. The complete wheel swap cost me 1,730 francs, which I think was totally worth it. The car looks amazing with those wheels. Of course, I also had to do a hi-fi upgrade. When I bought the car, it had a basic Alpine CD head unit. I still have that as well. So, at first I put in a Pioneer DEH P8600 MP I had left over from a previous car. After a while, I really wanted Bluetooth, so I replaced this unit with a Pioneer DEH 80 PRS, as I had found a good offer for a used one at 250 francs. While I was at it, I also replaced the speakers with DLS Ultimate's UP6i. I made custom adapter rings out of MDS for the speakers and also primed the adapter rings. A cheap used Hyphonic stereo amplifier was installed to provide adequate power to the speakers, and a small active subwoofer was installed in the storage compartment behind the driver's seat. I also dampened the door cards with aluminium butyl foil to minimize vibration. Together with cables and dampening material, the stereo upgrade cost me 1,290 francs. And to the purists out there, it was fully reversible. In fact, I still even have the original speakers. Man, I have a lot of stuff in my mom's basement. But that's all the upgrades. For the better or for the worse, I spent 3,183 francs on these upgrades. But wait, you might say, what happened to the old wheels? Are they still in my mom's basement? No. I sold those good condition 16-inch OEM wheels with almost new tires for an incredible 102 francs. Therefore, my net upgrade costs are only 3,081 francs. Okay, so we now have the costs of maintenance and the upgrades. To calculate the cost of ownership, we need to add the running costs. That's fuel, insurance and taxes. I spent 3,289 francs on fuel. The car averaged 13.6 litre per 100 kilometers, 7.3 miles per gallon US and 20.8 miles per gallon imperial. Taxes were only 1,254 francs, which averages to just 299 francs per year because of the unique way the Swiss road tax system works, where you can have 2 cars on one number plate and only pay taxes for the more expensive one, with an additional fee of 50 francs for the privilege of swapping your number plate between 2 cars. When I had the SL as a second car on the same number plate as the 12-cylinder sedan with its 6-liter engine, I only paid 50 francs per year for the SL. When I replaced the other car with the Porsche 996 Turbo, due to its smaller displacement, the Porsche became the second car costing 50 francs per year and I had to pay full taxes on the SL. That was 818 francs per year. So in total I get this admittedly quite low figure of 1,254 francs for over 4 years of road tax. Insurance, however, was much more substantial at 3,827 francs, which is 912 francs per year. So we get total running costs of 8,370 francs, or 1,995 francs per year. The cost per kilometer is very high because I did not drive the car a lot. Taxes and insurance are basically fixed costs that stay the same regardless of how much you drive. So if you drive a lot, the cost per kilometer will be substantially lower than if you only drive a few thousand kilometers per year. If we add everything together, we get my cost of ownership for the 500 SL, which is 17,767 francs. But we want to calculate the total cost of ownership. Therefore, we must take the purchase and the sale price of the vehicle into account as well. I bought the car in 2012 for 9,000 francs and I sold it at an online auction for 7,001 francs. So the car depreciated 1,999 francs during my ownership. Since I sold the car at an auction, I would have to deduct the 59 francs of auction fees, but we're not going to be that pedantic. Okay, I guess we are. So the depreciation was 2,058 francs, which at 491 francs per year is nothing compared to most used cars, let alone new cars. But now we have it. The total cost of ownership for my 1991 Mercedes-Benz 500 SL was 19,825 francs, which translates to 4,726 francs per year, or 1 franc and 38 cents per kilometer. Which makes it the most expensive car per kilometer driven I have ever owned. But as mentioned before, that is mostly down to me only driving the car less than 3,500 kilometers per year. If we look at the cost per year, the 500 SL fares a lot better and at 4,726 francs is actually the cheapest car I've ever owned. This is confusing. But my takeaway is that I have owned one of the last old school Mercedes, a classic beauty of a car with a smooth and revvy V8 for less than 5 grand a year, all in. And that is not bad. Sure, I could have replaced the soft top and done some cosmetic touch-ups on the front bumper, which would have made the ownership more expensive. But I didn't. Also, if you want to have the figures without the unnecessary upgrades, here they are. Total cost of ownership is 16,745 francs, 3,992 francs per year and 1 franc and 16 cents per kilometer. That's the numbers done. If the figures were all you wanted, thanks for watching, subscribe to my channel, comment, like, Instagram, the whole deal. But now I want to talk a bit more about the R129 generation of a Mercedes SL in general. What actually brought me to buy a 500 SL in the first place? Well, like when I bought my Porsche 996 Turbo, this car was bought as an alternative to an Alfa Romeo. Back then, I really wanted to buy an old Alfa Spider. I also went to look at a few, but soon realized that a really decent one would cost me considerably more than my 10,000 franc budget. So I started to look around and again was amazed that I could buy a Mercedes 500 SL for less than that. The car that shocked me as a car crazy child when somebody told me it cost over 150,000 francs. Being able to buy a car I previously thought completely unreachable is something that has incredible appeal to me and most likely to other car guys as well. This is basically the reason why to this day I have never bought a new car and I most likely never will. Depreciation, baby, the car enthusiast's biggest ally. Of course, you get higher maintenance costs with older cars and the cars tend to be more ropey. But in general, it still affords us regular people the possibility to own cars that we could never afford new, at least without taking on serious debt or blowing away a lifetime of savings. What was it like to own? The 500 SL was actually a very usable car. Being an automatic with a decently sized trunk, it is reasonably practical. The M119 engine is a great engine that likes to rev and over 4000 RPM develops a nice howl. In my mind, it provides the perfect amount of power to that car, especially considering that since the car had electronic traction control as standard, Mercedes-Benz in their wisdom thought it wouldn't be necessary to fit a limited slip differential to any R129 model, not even to the 400 horsepower 600 SL or SL 600. Like all convertible Mercedes, the 500 SL had a great heating system. It literally starts to blow warm air 30 seconds after you start the engine. The car also has most amenities and creature comforts you'd expect in a halfway modern car. Electronic windows, air conditioning, fully electric top, ABS, heated seats, adequate power. So why did I get rid of it? The R129 really was the last of the old Mercedes-Benz, for the good and for the bad. Very well built, solid and also a bit old-fashioned. While the car has 326 horsepower, it's more of a cruiser than a sports car. The 4-speed automatic transmission certainly doesn't help in that regard, but the main reason for me is the steering. You see, the R129 still used recirculating ball steering at a time when the majority of other sporty cars used a much more direct rack and pinion steering. That means that steering on the R129 is very indirect, it's great at low speeds and makes for effortless steering, but at higher speeds you really have to shuffle that wheel. It makes the car feel uncharacteristically boaty for a 300 plus horsepower roadster. The other way the R129 feels really old-fashioned is the seating position. Don't misunderstand me, it's perfectly comfortable, but the steering wheel is off center in respect to the driver, and just in general it's a bit more of a cramped seating position if you are a taller person. I even had to take off the sun visor so I would see the sky. Its successor generation, the R230, like the SL55 AMG that I also made a video about, is a massive improvement and today still feels modern in that regard. That said, the R129 was not uncomfortable, but the steering and the seating positions were quirky while my other car was a big comfortable sedan. But when I replaced that with the Porsche 996 Turbo, in comparison, the SL felt almost comically bad. And since I had found a good deal on the SL55 AMG, I jumped ship. Anyway, enough with the history lesson. It was really fun for me to go back to my old receipts and to remember things I had done to the car that I had completely forgotten, but this happens when you do a cost of ownership video 5 years after you sold the car. But this is the end of the video. If you found this video interesting, helpful or entertaining, please consider sharing it with somebody who might find it useful. Give it a like and let me know in the comments, what do you think about the 500 SL? Also, subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram to be in the loop on future developments. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. Bye. I hope this wasn't another 45-minute video like the one on the GTR.